So then the question is, okay, do you want to now have other brands from outside of Nigeria that you can be manufacturing for? Yet again, the industry is not mature enough. And so we wait for the time where things begin to change and therefore make this possible.
So in terms of the makeup space itself, do you think there'll ever be a time such where we can produce locally here, not necessarily for those who are distributing locally, but people who are also looking across Africa for manufacturers who can give them pretty much the quality that you could probably get in somewhere like Germany, England, or even China?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. But there's certain things that need to be fixed. Connectivity across the continent, payment platforms. It's still a real issue, right? We still are not able to. It's difficult for someone from South Africa to pay for an item in Nigeria, right? It's easier for you to pay for an item in the US and the UK because we still have payment platforms that are not yet in sync across, right? I've just seen that Paystack has just gotten something, some kind of regulatory approval from the Central Bank of Kenya. But Paystack has been in business for, more years than you would imagine. That it's only now that they're able to sort this out in East Africa. So we need to sort payment across the continent. We need to sort out transportation across the continent, train,
logistics, air freight.
Yeah, because they would say to you, for example, we use a lot of flowers here in Nigeria for weddings and what have you. If you ask the florists, they're having to buy Kenyan flowers from Netherlands.
Interesting. So Kenya is producing flowers in the Netherlands?
No, Kenya is producing flowers in Kenya, but it's easier for Kenya to send the flowers to the Netherlands and Netherlands to send to Nigeria, because sending from Nigeria to Kenya to Nigeria is harder.
That is so right? So disturbing.
So there's some numbers I don't have them right now, but the amount of transactions that we do within the continent is like maybe a quarter of the sort of transactions that we do in Europe, from Africa to Europe, Africa to the US. We do much more business than we do across the continent. Continent is like a little amount, a very minute amount. Yeah.
And what do you think really needs to change? Like where should we be looking at this? And I know that in the world of politics, you definitely have a voice. But is this a political issue that we should constantly be looking at governance in terms of fixing, or is this something that we, as entrepreneurs ourselves, that we need to be looking at, ways to leapfrog perhaps what would be the traditional solutions to these things? How do you see this ever changing?
I think it's both. I think it's both entrepreneurs finding solutions, and I know a few who are already working on payment platforms that will pathways that will help us to leapfrog around that area. But I don't know anyone who's working on logistics across the continent. There's still a lot of focus on, let's finish Nigeria. We haven't sorted out Nigeria. Nigeria is such a big country. So there's a place for entrepreneurs to find opportunities to now create solutions, right? But it's also a huge part of governance. It's a huge part. And there's still many African countries there are very few African countries with the leadership that Africa really needs. You can count them at the tip of your finger, and we need to fix that. Africans need to understand and to take more control over what happens in the political space, and not sit down and wait for the cabals of any country to determine who will be the next president or be the next governor of the state or mayor or what have you. That needs to change, and I'm hoping that the next generation of young people will become more active and therefore and become less self-centered in their choices, where we're not choosing because of how we're personally benefiting, but how the entire country will benefit from it.
It's actually very, I was saying earlier that, as I was listening to you speaking, it's very worrisome that we, at this stage, particularly for my generation, I would think that we were at that point now where we were able to bridge a lot of these gaps. And maybe it's a little bit of naivety. I don't know. When you sort of come into a space, you think, oh, let's just change it.
Of course.
Let's change it. I can't take this anymore. I'm going to just do my bit and it's going to change overnight. That burn and that fire is there. And when you talk about young people waking up and doing their part and getting involved, you know, and I had a conversation earlier. You said, you're part of the problem, Demi. And my heart sank a little bit because a part of me understood, and it's a conversation I'm constantly having with my peers, that I do in fact live in a bubble, not because you know, I'm sort of intentionally doing it. I just happen to find, and I'm very aware that there's many parts of Nigeria, many parts of across Africa that I'm not even privy to.
And
so,
understandably so.
Yeah, I'm not privy to, and many more people like me do exist, where we do have that burn to that desire and that burn to make a difference and to change things, but without fully understanding the you know, how extensive the problem is, that urgency to get involved, get stuck in, to try and make a difference and let your vote be counted and your voice be heard. It can be a little bit disconnected for me, because again, it's like, how can you possibly live in a bubble and still find a way to play a role, a key role in contribution to the changes? I'm not even understanding how you're even going to contribute to the changes. As we're sitting here talking right now, and you know, how do we begin to change manufacturing and industrialization of Africa? Well, it goes back to good governance. It goes back to a little bit of entrepreneurship as well, but it also goes into those who are raising their voices to ensure that we're mounting the pressure that is required to demand that change. But that goes back to my question, as a young person coming into this space, trying to find your footing, understanding that yes, you do have a passion, you want to, but you have no idea how you can possibly contribute to this thing. What would be your advice on how you get involved? You know, because again, like you said, there is no industrialization without good governance, especially good governance that's hindering you from getting all those core foundations and infrastructures in places that's going to enable you to do the good work.
Yeah. So I do think that, I mean, I look at my path and how engaged I've always been, and you know, and it's not a function, and I've never waited to be successful to be part of making a difference. And you can make a difference in many ways, but I think for where we are in Nigeria, you have to make a difference at multiple levels. So yes, you have to participate in politics. You have to know who's your local government chairman, right? And participate in the next election, because he determines what happens in the gutters, right? The drainage system in that. And to vote, and then not just to vote, but also to engage in that local government, because that's where the governance starts from where you are.
How might they be able to engage?
So, for example, each local government has an office. You live, for example, in an estate of 5-6 people, and you galvanize people within your small community, and you go and visit your chairman when he wins the elections.
Before or after he wins?
Let's imagine that he's won now.
Yes.
All right. You go and visit. Oh, so and so and so we live here, and we just wanted to congratulate you for whatever, exchange numbers, and you'll be surprised because they're not used to people doing that, right? He will give you his number, very likely. And then from time to time, you can engage to say, oh, you know, what are the plans? How can we support? How can we help? In other cases, you be part of electing, be part of voting. I remember the last local government elections, the place was completely empty. People didn't come out to vote. They were sitting at home watching TV or sleeping or cooking or doing stuff and forgetting that the food you're cooking today, you're going to eat it at
10x, or you're going to eat it also at 10x the price if you don't get involved in what's going on.
And you don't know whether the country will even be safe enough for your children to live in the near future. So that's even at that level. But in terms of, you know, your community, like you're having conversations with your driver and staff, ask them if they're voting. ask them if they've gotten their PVC. You know that you saw me today. And one of the first questions I asked you was, do you have your PVC?
Do you have your PVC?
Yes. That's making a difference. And you'd say, oh, but I just one person. No, I've gotten the culture of doing it. I also give the example of how I went to do I went to the spa, and I know the therapist. I know who she voted for the last election.